Hello and welcome to the Back of the Nest Match Report. I'm your host Chris Hambling, and myself, Caragh Skipper and Mike Scott are here to begin your end of season extravaganza. As many of our panel members as possible will be involved to give you 2 shows of everything Palace for the 22-23 season. This episode will discuss how Vieira has changed things at Palace, and there's an extended interview with Palace women's boss Dean Davenport. So, as I mentioned, it's Caragh and Mike with me. I've decided to grace you with my presence after a pretty, sparse season of presenting podcasts from myself. But hey, I've earned it. We've been doing this a decade. But I think, quick hellos I'll start with you, Mike, as you're on the top of the screen as I look. Hello. I mean, he's muted now. I can't hear a word he's saying. You're writing down that as an edit point, are you? I think we should keep that in.
How are you doing? Sorry, we've just done an interview with Dean Davenport.
Yeah.
It's been lovely, and now my brain's fried.
I think, if anything, that should have allowed you to be much smoother and, you'd practiced. And the fact that you did that at that moment makes me very, very happy. So good to have you on board, Mike.
Good to speak to you too, Hambo.
Hi, Caragh. How about you? You going to speak first?
Hello. Yeah. I think I might just sit back and enjoy you two, actually.
Yeah, it's been a good start, hasn't it?
What I particularly enjoy about it is not just that we always record the pod in this way and none of us can use it, but also that after God knows how many years of us all doing this through COVID, we still can't use it. So
no, and I refuse to learn. I'm not going to grow or improve as a human being. I'm nearly 42. That's finished now. It's now a slow roll down the hill to death, and that's what life's about. Yeah,
taking the Roy Hodgson approach there.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Oh dear. Anyway, so we have got some Palace news this week before we get involved. We will be talking, of course, a quick look back at the Man United game. Great way to end the season, strolling to victory against them lot, and a really strong performance to end the season with as well. You can talk about the fact they didn't have their best lineup out. I don't think they know their best lineup anyway, but we gave opportunity to a youngster, and we had a few players on the bench as well that maybe would have started in normal times. So to see them win that game so comfortably was great, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But main focus of today will be looking back at the season, and we're going to kind of focus on the first half of the season up until the start of the cup run, where we beat Millwall. I think that's probably where we'll end things. But we'll probably refer to stuff that happened later on, and I'm sure the second half of this end of season show will refer back to stuff that happened in the first part of the season. It will be fairly fluid, but that's roughly what we're going to cover for you. Hopefully it will be as entertaining as always. But I think news.
Well, but just before you jump into that, just to say, because you haven't heard it yet, but the Dean Davenport interview is awesome. So even if you don't want to hear any more of us, just skip forward until Dean's on there. It's a great half an hour chat. The man is a legend.
That's going to be at the end of this show, right?
It is going to be at the end of this show.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, and then there'll be another interview. I'm not going to spoil it, but there'll be another interview in the second half of the season review as well, which I'm sure you'll also enjoy. Thanks, Mike, for the correction there, and it was seamless. Probably wrong to refer to it now, isn't it? Because then it becomes clunky again.
Just in case people were about to turn off. That's all.
No, it's good. It's good. If anything, I've made it awkward. So, Palace news this week. I suppose hot off the press as we record. New sponsors. Caragh, it's an exciting new sponsor. And obviously it also caused a wonderful discussion in the Back of the Nest group that I didn't avoid in any way, where DR started to educate people on a number of topics. So first of all, your reaction, not to DR, because you fell into the trap of engaging with him, but in fact, your reaction to Palace announcing a sponsor that was not a betting organisation of any kind.
Very happy with the lack of betting sponsor. I don't actually know that much about Cinch, to be fair, apart from the whole Ryland Clark thing. Is that a thing? Is that his name? Don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
I think it's Ryland Davis, isn't it?
Oh.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'll look this up while you...
He muted himself halfway through that sentence as well. He's having an absolute stormy show.
I've had a theory about Ryland for quite a while that him and Olivier Giroud look remarkably alike, and nobody's ever seen them in the same room at the same time. So I think they might be the same person.
I mean, if Giroud stretched his face, like pinned it back, that I think they would be identical. Well, that's creepy.
So you're absolutely right. It's Ryland Clark Neal. Yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of Palace-related abuse with random pictures of people with massive teeth. He looks like I'm sure he's a lovely guy.
He's always fun when he presents things. I can't for the life of me. I saw him on Stand Up to Cancer Bake Off. He was quite entertaining on that. Unless I dreamt that. I'm pretty sure that happened. But yeah, if I did dream that, don't write in. But look, in terms of a sponsor, I mean, look, we know, ourselves, we've been in that position that as a sports broadcaster, you get offered what you get offered in terms of advertising. A football club tends to have a bit more choice than a podcast, but when a podcast is covering a team that is sponsored by a betting organisation, that was our justification for our sponsor, and I think people gave us some stick for it, and probably rightly so. You have to kind of try to be logical and try to make the right choices. But seeing Palace come along and pick something like, since you are quite a reputable company, they've grown incredibly. Not that we're necessarily, we're not sponsored by them, so I'm not going to talk too strongly about how good they are or anything like that, and I've not used them, but it just sits a little better to see the club taking a brave step away from what probably would have been more money elsewhere to go down this route.
Yeah, I think so, and I think we have to remember, there'll be a lot of fans of Palace and of other clubs that use betting companies as their sponsor that will have struggled or be struggling with some kind of betting addiction or whatever, and those sponsors could potentially exclude them from being able to follow their team in a kind of safe and confident way. So I think for me that's the biggest aspect of it is there's one conversation about the kind of morality of money in football at Newcastle, but there is another thing about how do we make watching football and being a part of your club as inclusive as possible. And I think anything that makes it difficult for people to deal with what they're dealing when football should be a place for them to escape is something that shouldn't be welcomed. So yeah, really happy to see no betting logos on any shirts.
It's great to see Palace on this curve, but I think most other clubs are going to follow suit because of the fact that there's going to be a block on it before too long. There was news this week about the fact that there's a heavy push for all Premier League clubs to stop using any kind of betting site as a sponsor. So I think they might just be jumping before they're pushed, to be honest.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. I mean, I speak as someone who had some gambling issues in the past, and it's something that's fortunately behind me. And I do feel strongly about it. We do, as I mentioned, we've had the same sponsorship ourselves, and we looked at that in a lot of detail, and we knew some people wouldn't like it, and and I go back to the reasoning that if you've got a bunch of people watching a team running around with a betting logo on their shirt whilst they're paying their Sky Sports subscriptions, which are full of betting adverts and all that kind of stuff, it feels a bit rich to pick on a podcast that people paying out money out of their own pockets to do something for nothing. So that's how I felt about it. But on reflection, I do think in an ideal world, well, if we'd had any other choice, I think we probably would have gone a different way. So I hope this is the start of something that sees that link between sports, particularly football, and betting, being broken, and it doesn't become part of the culture. We don't have people, up and down the country standing there with betting slips in their hand and focusing on other results rather than watching and supporting their teams. And for some people, that that £2.50 accumulator bet is their hope for the week, and you can see it's similar to a lottery and things like that. But it's still it's still a bit of a fallacy that it's gonna solve anything for anyone. So the further away from that we get, the better. But yeah, moving away from that, great news for Palace. First of all, great that they're also fronting both men's and women's teams as well. I think that's a really good move in terms of the shirt sponsorship, and not something that I've noticed too much in the past. So that's also a real positive. But we'll move away from that and let's talk about England call-ups again. No Tyreek Mitchell for the Nations League games, but Conor Gallagher and Mark Gay making the squad. I suppose, again, I'd start with yourself, Mike. I don't think we're surprised. I think, the performances of both in an England shirt was really good, really strong when they performed. And Conor Gallagher has had an astonishing season, but Mark Gay is getting talked up. I think he got Rookie of the Year for the Athletic. It was recently announced, which was an interesting way of going about things. But really strong performance, and crucially linked with a move to Spurs already as well in the press I saw this week. But we're going to get that, I suppose, when you see players playing for Palace getting called up for England.
Yeah, I noticed on Twitter that DR just reposted that rumour with the words "jog on," which I thought was a phrase that died in about 2008. So
before he was born, I think.
Yeah. No, the question I wanted to ask is, what positive effect does the Conor Gallagher call up have on Palace? Is there any kind of financial remuneration? Does he count as a Palace player while he's been called up? Does that mean that Chelsea have to fork out any more money?
Yeah, I believe there were certainly some confirmation on social media that there was a clause in the loan agreement that was activated when he got called up for the Nations League games. So there is a financial benefit to Palace for sure, which is really good news. I mean, it's really good news hiding the obvious bad news that he's not a Palace player really anymore, which is a real shame. But still, really, really, really positive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Gay is amazing. I sort of forget how young he is. The fact that he's younger than Tyreek Mitchell, isn't he? By a few months.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing. The guy has gone from strength to strength, and there's no way that he's not. Between him and Wilf, my player choices for the season.
Caragh, how about your reaction in terms of the kind of double-edged sword, I suppose, of seeing somebody like Mark Gay called up for England, that reputation growing all the time?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking when you guys were talking about it, I think it has definitely, that undoubtedly been the case, forever, that as soon as we see those England call-ups happen or international call-ups happen, we think, oh, right, okay, they're out the door. But do you guys think that where we're at now in terms of like expectations for the team next season and the seasons kind of following that, if Vieira is to stay, will we start seeing, are we moving into a position where actually we'll keep those players and those players will want to stay with us rather than just snatching up the big club deals where they're potentially going to sit on the bench?
I mean, it's what you hope, isn't it? That's always the moment, isn't it, that you just think at some point we're going to stop being that club that as soon as we get some success for our players, their reward is leaving our football club. That's go all the way back to 1991, 92, where we finished third, and looking at the squad we had then and thinking, okay, all we needed was just a sprinkling more quality and we could stay up there. And what actually happened was the side got dismantled fairly quickly, with Ian Wright leaving being the catalyst. And you kind of look at what we have now and you think, Zaha with a year on his contract, at least say the talk about getting him under another contract, but the release clause is in there. You look at Gallagher going back, and you could kind of have equal trepidation as you could excitement. But the talk coming out of the camp is that they love playing for Vieira. He's talking about increasing that ambition. The club have recruited really well, and you don't perform like we have as a team without there being a real team spirit, without engendering some kind of collective forward thinking. So I honestly think we've got a better chance than ever, but it does really put the pressure on for next season, because I don't think you keep this group together. Certainly somebody like Mark Gay isn't going to hang around with the reputation growing the way it is, with him representing his country, if Palace sort of drop off. And one player leaving could spark an exodus if we don't put our foot down and keep building this squad and keep growing it and getting more talent in.
Just going to over what Spurs have done in the past, I can't honestly see them offering some huge contract that's going to turn his head with, hundreds of thousands of pounds. So yeah, I mean, A, it's a rumour because we're talking about the very start of the transfer window, and B, I don't think that's a club that you need to be worried about. I can't see a situation where Daniel Levy's suddenly going to go, I'm going to pull out a load of money and buy him, just pay so much money that we've got him. I can't see it happening.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know what it would take for Palace to sell him. I really don't. But yeah, I assume there's no release clause there or anything like that. And I dare say Chelsea have probably got a sell-on fee, so it's going to be a fair old amount, I would say. Anyway, to round off the news as quickly as possible, so we can get chatting more about the football. It's Teo Adamola and Jake O'Brien have been called up for the Ireland under-21 squad, which is fantastic news for those two as well. And further, I know there was 3 young players called up for the England under 18s, I think it was, the other day as well. I think it was Joe Whitworth, Caden Rodney, and some poor person who I've forgotten, who's very talented, obviously. But that's awkward. You see, you get older and you forget things, don't you? That's the problem. And go back 10 years, start listening to us when we were Homestay Radio, and that Hambo never forgot a thing. Jack Wells Morrison. There you go. I've rescued it there, didn't I? It was perfect. You can get that.
Seamless. Absolutely.
Someone
seamless.
can get that in the edit and make me sound less ridiculous. Anyway, great news for those two indeed. And Jake O'Brien's obviously been on loan at Swindon and played a decent part there. And Adamola obviously made his debut for Palace, and he and Jezra Aksaki have been with the first team squad since the academy stopped for the season as well. So again, big things expected from those. So shall we move on quickly to have a very, very quick glance back at the final game of the season? And really, to be honest with you, it's going to be a bit of me quizzing you two, because I had a very disruptive day that day, and I was able to kind of watch it, but without full focus, and it was really disappointing for me. And I didn't get to see live Vieira's speech. I didn't get to see for the first time in over a decade the end of season lap of honour and things like that. I didn't say goodbye to Martin Kelly and any others that might have looked like they were saying goodbye. That lap of honour, when you're looking to see who's crying and who might be going somewhere, that kind of stuff. So I'll start with you, Cara. Kind of reflections on, if I can start at the end of the game, if that's a weird thing to do, and say what did you think of the final game of the season, and what about those last moments, the Vieira speech, the players going.
Well, the Vieira, we can't really get into it until we've mentioned my favourite chant of all time, to celebrate. Vieira. Can we just say kicking the Everton fans?
Yeah, he did. That's what he did.
It was great. I support it. We all support it. If they're going to be put in that position, and they're going to be left to fend for themselves, if somebody's stupid enough to square up to Vieira, what do you think is going to happen? So when he started doing his speech, and I think it was happening as he was doing the lap as well, but the whole stadium erupted in he kicks who he likes, he's Patrick Vieira, he kicks who he likes. And it was absolutely brilliant. But the best thing about it was the camera being on his face, and the flash of all of the like PR and media training he's ever had, like flashing before his eyes, being like, don't celebrate this, don't celebrate this, don't celebrate this, but very clearly wanting somebody to have caught it on video so that he can go home, watch it and sing along to it, I think, probably. So that was by far my highlight of the entire day, even though we beat Man United at Selhurst. But no, it was good. There was a real buzz, and I think like his speech was really nice at the end, because like paid a lot of tribute to the staff, and not just the kind of high profile staff, but like all of the staff who make the club, allow the club to run, really. And I think that said something. It says something about the type of manager he is, and the kind of way that he's embedded himself into the club, and kind of really feels like he's a part of the whole club rather than just doing his day job. And it was just it was really great atmosphere, really, really amazing kind of togetherness, a really nice celebration of people just feeling really excited, which I feel like isn't a normal thing to experience as a Palace fan, especially a whole stadium of us feeling like that. So yes, it was very enjoyable, and it was actually the first one of those that I've been present for, so probably the best one to have experienced.
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, that's definitely not the way it normally goes. You don't, that outpouring of positivity is usually, you usually see that maybe in a promotion season, something like that. That's, so I'm thinking about, 2004 and obviously I forget now, it's been 10 years, hasn't it? So it would have been 2012, those two promotion seasons, but obviously through the playoffs, you don't get that same thing. But anyway, it's, those kinds of, put that kind of positive vibe that you don't really get to experience that often as a Palace fan. And I think, the entire time I've been a Palace supporter, I don't think that I've ever seen the support on whole this excited about the team and about the football that we're watching. And we'll reflect on that in a bit, for sure, about, the standard of football, about how it's made. And as I said to you before we started recording, when you start to look back at the results from certainly the first half of the season in particular, they're not as good as I remember them being. And I think that tells you a lot about the performances, the standard, and how competitive we've been this year, because even when the results haven't gone for us, it's not really felt like a chore at any point. Mike, your kind of your reflections really on the final day of the season, how it went for you, and what feelings it left you with.
I just got to say, first off, plus goal difference, people. Plus goal difference.
Yep.
No, I wasn't there because I had my kids and I couldn't get a babysitter, so I was absolutely gutted. I may have passed on my ticket unless somebody from the club is listening, in which case I absolutely didn't pass on my ticket. And it was well used, but I was absolutely gutted. So I was watching it at home with my kids around me. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see any of that. And when I heard about the chant from Terence, I was absolutely gutted that I wasn't there.
There we go. I do want to say that I can talk about the fact that my ticket went to somebody else, because I did ask the club directly if I could do so on health grounds. So, which I was been allowed to do all season, and kudos to the club for that, for understanding that why I was, being as cautious as I was this year. And luckily, I was able to pass it on to Hartlepool United defender Timmy Aldacina, as a reward for him being so generous to Michael Elise earlier on at the FA Cup this season. I'm not going to explain any more than that. I don't know him personally, but
you have to explain more than that.
I don't know. If I'm supposed. I mean, he's someone DR knows, and he wanted to come to the game, so I felt it was the right thing to do in the circumstances. I don't think DR passed on my message, which was, you can have it as a token of my appreciation for your fuck up, against us in the cup. But...
So are you saying this was the deliberate mistake and we actually only beaten 2-0 because...
No, I don't think you could say that he had any kind of prior knowledge that this would be a situation.
Okay.
It's just worked out. It's just a little bit of a, he'll probably still be quite devastated about that moment. And this is just a little bit of a reward for his hard work.
Are you setting a precedent here? Are you saying that anyone in the FA Cup next year who allows us to score, you'll give them your ticket?
I'll go further than that. Any player from any opposing team who allows Palace to win a football match can approach me for a ticket, and I will get them a ticket.
Excellent. Yeah, I was about to say I'll offer the League Cup up for my ticket.
Yeah, you're going to go with League Cup, are you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't mind any game.
The bar's just been dropped so low from an FA Cup game to just anything, any game, any goal, just any.
Not like a friendly at Bromley or something, but
no, I suppose not a friendly. It has to count for something, I guess. Anyway, so look, game-wise, we're not going to analyse it at all. I thought it was a very strong performance, but it didn't feel like we had to really work that hard to beat Man United. They looked like a team that had really given up, an outgoing manager who, threw a couple of youngsters in there, and but frankly, that it's just one of the poorest Man United teams that I think I've seen in a while. But you can make all the excuses you like, but for a set of professional footballers to not care really, which they didn't, kind of does us a disservice to a point though, because we were very, very good. I think it's you could pick out a few players, but I think the last few games in particular, watching Eze start to find a bit of rhythm, and he could, and I think he was who Vieira was talking about when he said we might have the Conor Gallagher replacement at the club already. I think that's what he's talking about there, because Eze can be that player. Defensively has a bit to go to match Gallagher's tenacity and energy, but he has the talent really to cover that gap, and that was really good to see. And for me, Wilfred's goal was excellent. He's 14 this season, 15 if you count the cup. That's a proper striker's return. And I think Vieira said that he could have seen, if you're being harsh, he should have probably scored 10 more this season. And that, for Zaha at 29 coming on 30, for him to start peaking now is really interesting for me. And I think he is. I think he is peaking as a footballer. He might not be the expectations of other people where he's taken on 3 and beaten them in a blink of an eye kind of thing. He's sort of drifting away from being that player. I think now he is, a proper forward, and he's got a lot of time left still to continue to improve as a striker, as a goal getter, and it was great to see this season. It really was. But Mike, you want to jump in there before I go any further?
Yeah, just to say, let's not forget that until probably a couple of years ago, Man United was still the one of the traditional top 6 that we hadn't beaten. So let's not take this too lightly. Okay, they're on. They're not doing great, but we'd gone something like 7 or 8 years and we hadn't managed to get a win out of them, and it was the only team left. So it's a huge achievement. Just because it's the last game of the season, there's freakish results. Let's not take away from that.
It's a really good point. Was it the first win against them at Selhurst in 31 years in the league? I think it was.
A ridiculous amount. Like DR was a twinkle in the milkman's eye.
It actually was before I was born as well, just to make everyone feel old. Only by a matter of months, but still counts.
Yeah.
And also, is this the most amount of goals someone scored since the Benteke 17 that we always go on about?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So it's good to have a focal point like that. You think Gallagher's chipped in with a fair few. I think Mateta's chipped in with a decent number without playing a full season. Edouard's got a few, and it's been an interesting season. But again, think about to Vieira at the end of the game. It's one of the things that he talked about, wasn't it? That we scored a good number of goals this season, but should have scored more. And next season, he wants us to score more. Having a manager come out and say that is so good. There's no, let's understand our limitations. There's no, we've done well to do what we did. It's all about how can we get better, and I think that's a really good place to be.
And I wonder if that's a point as well on Zaha's kind of, I don't want to say improvement because he's always been great, but like what you said earlier, Hambo, about like at the age he's at to be kind of coming into his prime now. I wonder how much of an impact. I don't want to fall into the trap as well of like everything good being like it's all down to Vieira, but I do wonder if this is the first time in Wilf's career that he's had a manager that like really gets him and really gets like what makes him tick, and you know when he's kind of putting all of that pressure on himself, how to kind of get through to him. That relationship seems to be really strong, and I wonder how much of an impact that's having on him this season, and then hopefully for many seasons to come as well.
I think it's massive. I really do, and I understand the caution in overstating too much about Vieira, and we know this with managers. You know, managers being a football manager seems to be a really hazardous job. You know, in terms of setting a standard for yourself and then having to live up to it and having to continually progress, and that's why so few managers make it beyond a couple of seasons. And we don't know what will happen next year. And all this praise of Vieira, we might backtrack on, but I don't think we should. I think this first season that he has shown himself to be a pretty incredible manager. But I do think a lot of that comes from the player that he was. He's the reputation he has. Most of the young players will know, and they've got better access now to the playing careers of the likes of Patrick Vieira. See, I still think of him as almost as a current player. That's how old I've got. But I can remember him starting off at Arsenal and right the way through. But just because a young player coming through, but Wilf, for example, will have recollections of Patrick Vieira at his peak as an Arsenal midfielder, I'm sure, and he would a hero worship the guy to suddenly be a peer. Yes, he's his manager, but players and managers are so much closer these days, and Vieira's very hands on. So he's basically looking at Zaha as a one of the captains, as a massively influential player. So, he's got his arm around Zaha and asking his opinion. So the kid in Wilfried Zaha is like, oh my God, Patrick Vieira wants to know what I think, So there's an element of that for sure. And I think reputation counts for a lot. But the biggest thing that Patrick Vieira has is that the attitude of a winner. And it gets talked about in really kind of loose terms about so it's something that's almost thrown out there, but it is really important to understand the mentality of a player who played at the top level as long as he did and won what he won. He played in a team that didn't lose a game all season. He won a World Cup. I think he won the European Championship. That might have been after him. I can't remember. I'm old, but he's won pretty much everything that there is to win. And had a very, very long career. So they, if anyone wants to know what it takes to be a top footballer and to produce consistently, they have no better person to ask than Patrick Vieira. And that goes for Wilf right the way down into these academy kids coming through. And that's why he was such a good appointment. And that's why when you look back at the fears that people sort of kind of legitimately had, and some of the kind of dismissive attitudes towards Vieira when he was appointed, that's why they look so ridiculous right now.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest examples of that, I think, is Michael Olise this season, right? Like, I as much as his talent is absolutely undeniable and he's obviously worked incredibly hard, I just don't see that he builds the confidence as quickly as he did this season without that kind of mentor aspect of Vieira's management, I don't think. Yeah,
for sure. And he does seem a very interesting character, Olise. But he has, think about how he was managed. It was managed like, the way a Warnock would manage a young player. Do you know what I mean? He would give him a taste, take him out, give him another taste here, start him, then drop him when he didn't perform. He's really managed him very, very closely. And, over the course of a season, Olise seems to have been perfectly introduced to a squad and, has been dealt with, as well as you could possibly hope for a young player to be dealt with. Right, so anyway, I think we got a little sidetrack on our review there of the Man United game. So I do want to just make a quick reference to the fact that Jez Raksaki started that game and gave us a really good hour there, and hopefully more minutes for the youngsters to come next season. But we'll take a short break now and head to the Dean Davenport interview. So, Mike, what do we got to look forward to here?
Yes, so for those of you that are invested in the women's team, this is going to be an absolute treat. And for those of you that maybe haven't had the opportunity yet, we've had a beautiful half an hour chatting to the manager of the women's team. So just please have a listen. It's absolutely fascinating. The guy is a legend. Let's go to him, then we'll come back and we'll discuss the rest of the season and we'll wrap it up before we carry on tomorrow with part 2.
Alexa, play Back of the Nest podcast.
Playing Back of the Nest, CPFC podcast from Amazon Music.
Back of the Nest, now on your Alexa device and Amazon Music.
Right, hello all. Today we are very kindly joined by long-term Palace women's boss, Dean Davenport. Hello, Dean. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, all good. So just to say, we've got Caragh here to ask some questions and myself, Mike. So let's start on this season. Obviously, congratulations. Give us your thoughts looking back at it. You know, finished really well, up in 4th place. You know, how did it feel at the end? How did the season feel as a whole?
As a whole, it was a really good, positive season. I don't think it was expected, to be quite honest with you, by people outside of the club. But obviously, we had a good start. We had a good 4-3 win against Bristol in the first game of the season, and then it we kind of spiraled from there. We had a good little run. Obviously, there's been ups and downs as there always is in football, but yeah, the main thing was that we all stayed together. What we did pre-season, we kind of put a new philosophy together. Me and James Mars. I brought James into the club about 18 months ago. And it was good because it enabled me to bounce more ideas off of James. He's very experienced in the women's game. And he always keeps saying to me, "You've got to trust the process." So again, we put a new philosophy in just to play nice, attractive football. We wanted to create this identity that obviously players and fans wanted to come down and watch, and people knew who we were when we was on the pitch. It's quite funny because we knew there was going to be mistakes. We told the players that they had to have 100% buy-in to what we was doing, because there are going to be mistakes. But as long as we was to learn from their mistakes, then obviously we would get better as a team and better as a club. And like I say, we started off with a great 4-3 win over Bristol City, who were one of the obviously promotion candidates to go straight back up after being relegated, obviously from the WSL. So that gave us a big, massive, obviously boost at the start of the season. And then, from there on, we just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. Like I said, there was mistakes, quite a few mistakes, but trusting the process, obviously, and the players, I've got to give them praise because obviously it's hard to, when you can see goals, to carry on doing the same things that they're being asked to do. They did that. And we found ourselves, went on a 7-game unbeaten run. That kind of pushed us up the table, give us the points we needed to obviously carry on. Post Christmas, we started off really well, and then we had a little dip in form where we kind of played the Liverpools of the world and obviously the London Cities, which we had a couple of harsh beatings, to be fair, which brought us back down again to a little bit of reality. But I've got to say the girls' hard work after that culminated in us finishing really well towards the end.
Hi, Dean. So you mentioned there in that answer about kind of the togetherness, and sounds like there was a real effort to kind of make sure that was there all the way through the season. I think definitely the couple of games that I came to the Charlton one, and then the last home season. Oh my God, there's an edit point for you, Mike. If I can get my word out, I'll start again. From the couple of games I got to this season, the Charlton game and the last home game of the season against Watford, you could really see on the pitch how much every single player was just fighting for each other as much as they were fighting for themselves. But through those kind of more tricky parts of the season, how did you keep that kind of ethos going and keep that atmosphere around the club, that kind of buzz that there was towards the end of the season? Was it tricky to keep that going in the the harder parts of the season, and how key do you think it was to kind of the result at the end of the season?
Again, yes, it was tricky at times, but I've got a group of players that trust in what we're doing. Obviously, like I said, trust in the process. But I've also got a group of players who, obviously, when we started our recruitment, obviously at the beginning of the season, we didn't recruit on names or players that have played WSL football or players that have scored so many goals. It was based on, obviously, people's characters to come into the squad. It was based on their values, and obviously, I'm a Palace fan. I wanted to base it on, obviously, how important it is for that certain player to wear the badge. And I think if you can get all them elements in a player, then obviously the togetherness will fall in. And like I've said in previous interviews, this season the togetherness within the squad, staff, and obviously playing squad has been immense. And if you can keep getting them 1%ers out of players at the end of the season, do you know what I mean? It does not make a difference. So for me, it was difficult at times because you've got to pick players up after getting beat 4-0 by Liverpool. But it wasn't just me who was picking players up. We give a lot of the players a lot of ownership at Palace. So again, we've got some big leaders, and they've got big standards and high standards which they set themselves. So for me, it wasn't so much me having to drag them up or my staff having to drag them up. It was the players doing it themselves, because they could see what kind of run we was on, and all they wanted to do was finish really strongly. But yeah, there was difficult times. But like I say, the players more or less dragged themselves through them.
I mean, that kind of brings us on to the next question we had written down, really. So you're going to lose Hannah Churchill. Like, I don't really. It'd be interesting if you have insight into it and are allowed to share it. Like, how do you go about dealing with people leaving, and then how does the recruitment work?
Yeah, I can say some bits. Yeah, it's difficult at times because obviously some of the players that will be leaving us have got different reasons for leaving us. Obviously, Hannah's retiring, which is a loss because Hannah's a lovely girl. She's had a couple of injury problems, and I think it's time that she said herself, it's time for her to obviously think about other things outside of football in her personal life, which is fine. Obviously Hannah made that decision, but yeah, we're in that process now. Obviously recruiting. It's a nice part of the season, but it's also not so nice part because obviously players will obviously get released and players will leave due to schedules that they can't make or their careers outside of football.
Yeah. So you're on the phone like pleading to people, or
Yes, I have been pleading, but I've also had some lovely phone calls as well. So it kind of works both ways. Like I say, we're doing 2 schedules at the moment, so it's difficult. But again, I want players that want to play for the club. I want players to know what it means to wear the club badge, and that's the avenue I like to go down. And it's kind of worked for us. Obviously, last season we do a lot of our recruitment based on stats as well. So players we bring in have to fit into the way we want to play. Again, most importantly, have to fit into our values.
And just before we look too far forward going into next season, I wonder if there's a favourite game you have from last season, Dean, that you can tell us about.
I think that's quite obvious. I think you was at it. No, to be fair, there's been a couple. It's not, the Championship isn't an easy league. By far, this is our fourth year in it, and this is probably the first year where we haven't been obviously down the lower echelons of the league, which is really pleasing. But we've broken loads of records this season. Obviously, most wins, most points, most goals scored as well, and obviously our highest finish. But within them wins, I've got 2 really. Durham away and at home. It's difficult to go to Durham. It's a tough place to go. Obviously, travelling up there, and we've never beat Durham in the 3 years prior to being in the league. But to go up there and get a result just after Christmas was fantastic. And again, both the Charlton games. They've been a little bit of a thorn in my side throughout the years. We've been playing against each other, and this season to do the double over them was just unreal for me as a manager and obviously as a Palace fan as well.
Finish above them as well,
even better.
Yeah. Well, so talk us through that. So I think the club happened to mention recently that you've been with them for 17 years, so maybe showing your age a little bit. So I don't know how you felt about that. But tell us about your Palace affiliation, how you ended up with them and stuff.
Yeah, well, obviously I played football myself, and I've got a daughter, Jade. I've said it many times. She came to watch me play every Saturday, and she asked me if she could start playing football. So by all means, I took her down to obviously the Palace trial many moons ago, and she got in. I was still playing at the time, so I couldn't really give too much time to it. But obviously, used to take her training and obviously get to the games on a Sunday. And then obviously the manager at the time, he decided to leave. And then Lee Snashfeld, the chairman at the time, knew I played a little bit and asked me just to take over coaching until they found a new manager. But yeah, that new manager never turned up, so it was left for me, and I just stayed there ever since. And obviously went all the way through the youth section with my daughter's team, very successful. And then I was asked to take over the first team 10 years ago, and I'm still here today.
Excellent stuff. And I mean, does it make obviously, because I think a lot of our listeners probably I've only really been able to start following the women's team within the last couple of seasons, so they're not necessarily that informed about things. Like, how much does it impact? Like, how much of it is a labour of love on an evening? How many extra hours do you guys do? That kind of thing. We just seeing perhaps the Palace player and that kind of stuff covering more of you guys. Yeah. It's obviously great to see, but like behind the scenes, how much of your week is Palace? How many hours a week are you putting into it?
Yeah, it's not just, obviously, again, it's not just me, it's my staff and the players.
Sure.
So on a obviously, and all the players have full-time jobs as well. So obviously we're a part-time setup at the moment. So last season it was, I'll just go through the schedule if it's easier. Monday we would be in over at the academy ground. We'd have a day off on Tuesday evening. We'd be in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Obviously off Saturday unless we was travelling to a game. And then, game day on a Sunday. So it takes more or less 5 hours of an evening in the week. And then potentially if we're travelling away, it's another, depending where we go, take Durham, it's another 7 hours by coach. And the 7 hours back on a Sunday. So, it's quite a lot of time. And that's why I think the players and obviously the staff have to give them so much praise, because to do that after a full day's work is immense. And I think that's where the difficulties kind of sit in. But their desire and their characters to do well, it kind of helped us to get where we are today.
So, and just off the back of that, Dean, so it feels like you're kind of in like a bit of a transition period at the moment, because I think, so all of the WSL are full-time, right?
Yeah.
And I think a significant chunk of the Championship are now. So like what's the prospect of Palace Women's going full-time in the future, and what kind of needs to happen between now and then for that to come into effect?
There's been positive talks this season. Like I said, we've put 2 schedules together just in case we need to adapt to full-time or literally stay at part-time. Obviously, I can't say too much because it's at the hands of obviously Steve and the board. So, we potentially we could go. We could have a hybrid full-time on our hands, which is good. Like I said, we've set 2 schedules out, so either one will work. It's just a matter of obviously carrying on, getting our heads down, just keep doing the work we're doing in preparation for obviously what will be.
That sounds very exciting. It's just looking at what's been achieved this season and imagining what could happen if we were all full time. That would be very exciting stuff. What does that kind of gap between the Championship and the Super League look like at the moment? Obviously, a lot of our listeners will be kind of really well aware of what that gap looks like for the men's game, but maybe not so much for the women. So, like, what is the kind of difference in standards when you're looking up to like a possible promotion and that leap in the future?
Yeah, I think you can equal it up with the men's structure. I think the WSL there's a big gap between obviously the top teams in the WSL to the teams in the Championship. Say your Chelseas, your Arsenals, and your Man Cities. Obviously, the financial clout that they've got massively outweighs what obviously the clubs in the Championship can do. And obviously within the Championship, I think if you've got the biggest wage bill, you've got the biggest budget, the best facilities. It's shown in recent years. For example, your Man United, your Leicesters, and your recent winners, Liverpool, obviously all had the biggest budgets facility wise, and obviously have gone into the WSL. So I think obviously financial wise is massive. If you get good backing, obviously you enable yourself to make your squad bigger and to get better players in. But one thing I must say with Palace this year is allowing us to use the new facility over at Beckenham, the academy ground, has been a major plus for us, because it's enabled us to obviously train the 4 nights a week. Well, last season trained the 4 nights a week, which has helped us obviously get more game time on the grass, getting more information into the players. So that again, that was a massive plus for us, obviously, last season.
Yeah, and beautiful it is over there as well. It's like, obviously you're over there some days you don't want to be, but on a lovely, beautiful, sunny day, it's a lovely place to be.
Yeah, it's unreal.
So let's just go back a little bit. So obviously you led the team when they were given a place in the Championship. So what? Talk us through that. Like how did that happen? Is that one of your highlights as a Palace manager? I mean, I presume it is, but
yeah, it was a highlight. At first, it started off as kind of a low one, because obviously we'd put our bid in from the chairman, and obviously the general manager Paula at the time put a bid in for us to go up to be promoted, and obviously fed it into the FA. And it's quite a nice story actually. We went down to, we was given a date where the FA was going to phone us to let us know whether we'd been successful in our application. So the chairman decided, let's all go to the pub, and then obviously we was banking on it being a yes, and then we could all have a drink, etc. And then it kind of waiting. Obviously the phone call then came, and they decided that the application we put in wasn't good enough, wasn't quite right. So we wouldn't be able to go up into the Championship, which was a bit gutting, because we thought we'd nailed it. So again, then we went back to our normal business, and I was obviously recruiting players to play in the National League then. And then I think it was literally 2 weeks later, another phone call came from the FA saying that I think it was Doncaster Bells had pulled out of the league, and they'd promoted us back into it. But by then I'd already done my business, bringing in players to in the National League, the league below. So we literally, that season, we went into the Championship with a team that was ready to go and win the National League. So that league was that league at the time was probably the toughest, obviously, season to date. But again, the players did well. We managed to stay in the league, and yeah, we are where we are today.
Yeah, I presume you still had a celebratory beer at that point, right?
We had a couple.
Yeah, okay.
Looking at the team as it is now, Dean, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit. I hope you don't mind.
No worries.
But start off with a nice, easy one. So who is the easiest to coach in the team at the moment? Who kind of just, takes to it like a duck to water, kind of second-hand woman, if you will, in the team?
We've got a few. It's a tough question, because they all, like I said, they're all good. They're all experienced. They all lead themselves. Best trainer, I would have to go with Cole Haynes, I would say.
And you can definitely see that paying off on the pitch.
Oh, right? Massively, yeah. Cole started off really well. She had a little bit of a dip, like I think everyone does. But I think if you look at her games towards the end of the season, her goals she scored from midfield, I think she was the highest assists and goal scorer from midfield in the league when it finished. So again, she's a very intelligent player. She works well. She works hard. Her work ethic is unreal. But like I say, we've got all players like that in the team, and that's the kind of togetherness that we've got, and the work rate we've got as individuals and collectively.
And you can definitely see, like, after the games, for listeners that haven't been down, the players kind of come out and say hi to the fans and spend a lot of time interacting, and you can definitely see how much fun they're all having, I think.
Yeah, do you know, Caragh, I think that's important. I don't want players to be discharged from fans. We work hard to get the fans through the turnstiles, and I say it to them every game. It's important that we appreciate that, and it's important that we go over to the fans and we give them a clap. It's important that we go to the sidelines and sign the children's posters, etc. And I think it's important that obviously now we're allowed to go into the bar afterwards for a bit of food to go and speak with the fans. That's one of my things that I feel is important, and I don't think you get. Obviously, I say you don't get it from the men's team because obviously for security reasons, etc. But I just feel that it's important that we do that with our fans.
Definitely, it definitely creates a unique atmosphere, I think, for a football fan to experience that. But the tricky question: who's your team troublemaker? Who winds everyone up? Is the practical joker? Who causes the trouble?
We got a couple of practical jokers. I think I'd say Bianca and Shiv Wilson. They were the two jokers. Always on TikTok. Always dancing. Lee Nichols not bad herself, to be fair. But yeah, there's a couple. There's a lot of banter that gets thrown around in the dressing room, which is quite funny just to stand back and watch. But yeah, that's what dressing rooms are like, aren't they? So yeah, it's good fun. It's all good fun.
That's it's worth reminding people. We did an interview with Lee Nichol and one with Molly Sharp as well, so they're back in our back catalogue. We might give them an extra push after this one. Obviously, I'm going to ask you a question now. It might be relatively difficult to answer. If it's awkward, then feel free to tell us. But how has the relationship with you guys changed with the club over time? For example, as a punter, I can see this season that you can see the women's fixtures, the results, all kind of linked straight from the main CPFC page. So how has it developed? How have you seen it? And is it going in the right direction?
Yeah, when I first took over 10 years ago, or a bit more than that actually, Simon Jordan was in the chair, and it was non-existent. We just used to obviously wear the kit, wear the badge. That all the girls had to pay obviously their annual subs. That's when I first started. So that difficult times then really, because obviously we wasn't recognised within the club as much. But obviously as time's gone on, I will say obviously Steve and obviously Phil Alexander. Obviously I know he's left, but at the time shown more and more interest. And like I say, the way where it is now, it's massive. We feel a massive part of the club. Like I say, bringing us into the training facility was a massive buzz for us as a club and as for players. And the integration between obviously us and the men's team now is massive. It's major. It's never been so good. So yeah, and hopefully obviously that continues to happen because we are part of the club. We do feel part of the club, and we need to be Crystal Palace. We need to be part of them. So yeah, it's been good. I couldn't have asked for much more, and like I say, hopefully that continues to grow stronger and stronger.
How would you feel if come next season you got a text going, right, we need a 30-foot Dean picture on the side of the main stand? Would you say if you're massive mugshot of you when they're redeveloping the back of the main stand, big old picture of you, how would you feel about that?
I would have to go on a diet first. But yeah, I'm not one for things like that, but I'm sure I could make it work. But no, listen, I'm one of them people that it's not all about me. It's not about what I do. It's more about the players within what we do, and the staff. I'm very quiet, laid back. I don't really put myself out there, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I just want us to do well because my main thing is Crystal Palace is my football club because I've supported them from a really young age. My brother played for them many years ago, and it's just been in our family. All my two boys have got season tickets. They go to away games as well. So Crystal Palace is part of us.
Oh, we're gonna hit you with some questions on the men's season at the end. So don't you worry about that.
So yeah, it's just it is what it is, and I just love doing it, and it's something that I want to continue doing until I get told otherwise.
And Dean, how important would it be for the women's team, do you think, to be able to play games at Selhurst? Obviously, Hayes Lane is a really good location for the kind of size of kind of fan attendance at the moment. But how important would it be for the players, and also what impact do you think it would have on the number of fans attending if those games were at Selhurst?
Well, I'd like to think that obviously, if we was potentially allowed to play, obviously our games at Selhurst, I know we have literally one a year, and obviously this year's game was against Sunderland. I think we had something like 700, possibly 800 turn up. I can't quite know the figures, but again, it was a great experience for the players. I think for some of them, it was the first time they'd played there. Walking into the changing rooms and seeing all the facilities, etc., was amazing for them. I've been in charge for about, I think it was 3 or 4 games there now. But if we was allowed to play there, would the crowd come? I'd like to think they would. It's how we market it and get the obviously the fans through the door. We have our loyal core of supporters. And what I must say is this season our attendances have gone up, which is good. And obviously I see new faces. Obviously every other week we play at Bromley. But at the precise moment in time, Bromley is our hub, is our home ground. We've been there for many years now. I'm not saying I don't want to play at Selhurst, but I just feel if the attendances were right and we could raise the attendances, then obviously playing at Selhurst would be amazing week in, week out.
Well, similarly. So one gripe that I brought up on the pod a few times, well, 2 gripes, I suppose. Firstly, I think too often there's a clash between the men's first team and the women's games, and sometimes the age group games as well. And I don't know if that's easily sortable, but it would be great for the women's games to appear on the Palace player. I don't know if that's your remit in any way. But is that something that's kind of hamstrung by the rights of the championship, or is there a chance that maybe we'll see, women's games appear on the Palace player for those people that have paid for it?
I don't really know the answer to that question. We've played it. We've had a couple of games on the Palace player TV. Obviously, we've got the FA player that obviously gives us coverage of our games every week and highlights, etc., etc. But yeah, again, I'd have to ask obviously Paula, the GM, that question. But yeah, if it's possible, I feel it's doable, and I would like to do it, obviously, because that will get us out to the fans even more. So if it could be done, then yeah, magic. We'd love to do it.
Yeah. So I've got a little girl. She's 6, and she wants to watch women's football. She's not interested in men's football, absolutely. But at the moment, pretty much, like you say, you're either on the FA website, which is can be a bit up and down, let's say, and then otherwise I'm going to lose her to watching Emma Hayes and she's going to end up a Chelsea fan. So it's something that needs to be resolved.
Well, you can always bring her down to Bromley, mate.
yeah, absolutely.
I might start a personal lobby because I'm actually moving away from Croydon in the next couple of months. So just for me, I'd like them to be on TV, which I don't know if that's going to make any impact, but I think it's a point as well because the wider club has fans all over the world, right? And it's not always possible for them and for other fans for other reasons to get down in person, but I feel like it would help raise that profile and create that buzz around the team if we could have more access to it in the same way that we do to like Mike mentioned, the kind of youth teams that always, I think all of their games are on Palace TV, and just helps as well, I think, follow something Alex Scott said the other day I think it was halftime in the coverage of the Women's FA Cup final, that like we're in a position now with women's football where you can really follow players' journeys and like their careers, and you can buy into kind of their stories a lot more than maybe you used to be able to when that information wasn't around. And I think that's probably a big part of it. Like if you can go back and watch how a player progresses over a season, or how the team's progressed over a season, you just have that bigger level of buy-in. And how much of an impact do you think that would have on the feeling for the players, Dean? Do you think it would make an impact to have that like wider attention, or does it still just come down to kind of that atmosphere on game day?
No, I think it's both. I think every footballer wants to be noticed, and there's no difference from obviously from our girls. Some of them do get noticed quite a lot, which is good. But I think the FA have got to start looking at it as well. I think obviously there's a lot around the WSL, obviously being on Sky and being on obviously the BBC Red Button at times. And I think if they're doing it for the WSL, why couldn't they obviously drop down into the Championship, even if it's just for highlights, for goals scored, whatever. Obviously that also will also give us that the screening that obviously we need as a club. But yeah, I think it's something that they've got to look at, because at the moment it's getting better. It's getting better, but can we go even further and introduce the Championship alongside the WSL? And I think once they do that, I think it becomes more interested to obviously the wider fan, the wider person, to actually come down and have a watch and actually see the way we play, because we do play some attractive football. There is good football in the Championship. So yeah, I think it's something they need to look at, something they need to work quite hard on, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna finish off with a few difficult questions. So first of all, expectations for next season, and can you give us any lowdown on new players? And I probably can guess the answer on that, but
our expectations are to start the season to go and win the league. I always start with every season we need to progress. We need to get better than obviously where we finished. Obviously the previous season, like I say, we've done that. We've done that for the last 4 years. Obviously this year, 4th / joint third. I'm hanging on to joint third just because of the goal difference. But we need to obviously first and foremost we win the league. If there's one team better than us, then we've got to look to come second. But our ultimate goals is to obviously at the start of the season, like everyone's would be, is to go and win the league. On player recruitment, it's still ongoing, mates. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't say nothing.
Yeah, figured as much.
A technical question, Dean, on the player recruitment, but I promise it's not going to push you on releasing any state secrets. But how do the contracts for the women's team, women's players work? Do they get the kind of 2-year, 3-year deals, or is it on a kind of rolling basis? Is there like a standard across the league? Because I have absolutely no idea, and I'm going to guess that quite a few of our listeners don't either.
Yeah, I can't say for other teams, but for us, we do a 1-year contract, and then we also do a contract with an option. But I do know this season we are looking at doing 2-year contracts, 2-year deals. So we've predominantly gone with 1 year, some with an option. But what I can say is obviously, yes, this year, the kind of recruitment way we're going, we are looking at obviously 2-year deals as well as alongside the others I've just mentioned.
Nice. That's maybe a symbol of the kind of forward planning of the club and that kind of extra bit of stability that there seems to be throughout the team at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I say, it's tough because obviously the players have got careers outside of football at the moment. So until we make that plunge definitely into obviously full-time football ourselves, I think that's when obviously things change within the club and it becomes a little bit easier to deal with them situations.
All right, we're going to see if you want to put your Palace fan hat on now. Manager hat off. Give us your thoughts on what has also been a kind of mirror of the excitement of the women's team's success over this season. The men have obviously had a successful season as well. Have you had time to follow the men's team? It sounds like you're pretty chock-a-block with your day job and your managerial job. But what are your thoughts on the season that the men's team have had?
I think they've been outstanding. I try and get to as many games obviously as I can. I went to obviously the Man United game Sunday, and I thought that was outstanding. But for what Patrick's done when he's come in and turned obviously the kind of everything around the football is more attractive. It's easier on the eye to watch, and no disrespect obviously to Roy because he's done a fantastic job from the tenure that he was in. But I think we kind of took the shackles. Patch kind of took the shackles off, and the football we're now playing is good to watch. And listening to all the pundits now on the telly, it it gets exciting because they're starting to say good things about us as a club and as a team and as the way we play football. And we're certainly a difficult team to now go and beat.
Well, I'll finish off with a couple of questions then. Firstly, have you been lucky enough to have a beer with Patrick Vieira? And what kind of guy is he?
The answer is no, not yet.
So,
I'd like to, but yeah, that's
we'll sort out the date for you guys to go.
And what would you say is a successful season next season? Obviously, I think it's probably still transition season for the men's team, but how would you say a successful season?
I think if we get the right signings in, I think and play the same way, I think if we can look towards Europe, getting one of them slots, I think that'd be a massive season for us. Like I say, like you said, we're in transition, but I've got to say we play some fantastic football, and now like I said, we're a difficult team, obviously, to come and beat. And if you've got Guardiola saying that, then you know you're on the right path. So yeah, I think if we can eye up your European place, that would be fantastic.
Right, so you heard it here first, everyone. Dean is adamant that there's going to be promotions to the WSL and we're going to be in Europe as well. So excellent stuff. Right, cheers, Dean. Really appreciated your time. You already spend enough time as it is and then chatting to us as well. So thank you so much.
No, lovely. I appreciate it. And thanks for the interview and thanks for putting us out there. It's really good.
We'll get you and the team on regularly. We'll keep it happening. So that'll be the third one we've had this season. We'll keep it going.
Lovely. Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Fantastic stuff there from Dean and the team. Well, I say that in full disclosure, I haven't heard it yet. And this is how podcasts work, isn't it? I had to do that because Mike had just taken a sip of beer and I wanted to have him exasperated whilst trying to swallow beer. He may edit this bit out, hopefully not. Anyway, so obviously hugely appreciate Dean giving his time to Caragh and Mike. So look, let's talk about the first half of the season. Perhaps, we've touched on some of the themes already, and I will start there. Really, we talked about Vieira, the job he's done. So there's no real better place to start than our own reactions. How did we genuinely think? How do we remember us feeling on the appointment of Vieira? And I'll probably start with you, Caragh. What do you think? And then after you've answered and Mike is answering, check your Twitter and go and find out what you actually said.
I think I'm in the blessed position of not having tweeted anything, but I will go back and check that.
I'm going to have a look while you're talking.
Oh no, no. I think I was really excited. So I have a really when someone treats Palace badly, I react in the same way that I do if it's happened to like a friend of mine or whatever. So the whole thing over Nuno really, really made me very, very, very angry. So then we obviously appointed Vieira, well, after however many other people we went through, but appointed Vieira. And I was like, do you know what? If he respects the club and he wants to come to us and he's not going to take the piss, then I'm very happy. And I absolutely loved him as a player. And I was kind of just quite open-minded because I hadn't really paid any attention to his kind of managerial appointments prior to him coming to Palace, so was kind of ignorant to any of the concerns or hope that maybe those people who paid more attention had. And it just kind of felt like we were in a position where there were so many things up in the air. It wasn't just a new manager. It was like the huge change in kind of player personnel and everything at the same time, that I think my attitude was just a bit like, all right, let's see how it goes. And that appears to have gone quite well.
Yeah, I just found a tweet saying that you were absolutely devastated that Roy left and that this was a terrible choice. But fair enough, I'll retweet that in a bit. I was kind of ambivalent. I love me a bit of MLS, and he'd done all right at New York, but he'd not set the world alight. I didn't know anything really about the knee situation, so I bowed to Patrick on that, who knows his stuff. And straight off the bat, he said this is the right guy. And a little, I mean, we'll cover it, but a little bit sceptical initially at the start of the season. I didn't think it was going to be another absolutely terrible gone in 5 games job, but I wasn't sure whether he was capable of, pulling off a decent finish. But it's got a lot to do with the players we got in as well. So, I mean, if him and Dougie work that well together, it became pretty obvious pretty quickly I was enjoying the football more. And as soon as you enjoy watching it, then you're behind the manager. So it didn't take long for me to be a big old fan. Probably the same as everyone else, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You forgive a lot when the football's decent, but at the same time, if you have a run of defeats, it really it can still sap the life out of you.
Pardew.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah, and when you see no kind of, not even a nod to trying to change something, if you go back to Pardew, it's a really good example that he did try to play some decent football, and at times it was good. But his approach to losing football matches was to say, you lose football matches and you just have to wait till you win football matches. And you just kind of like, okay, Alan, could you try and do something about it, though? And he didn't seem keen. Whereas, you look at this season, Vieira's first season as Palace manager, he's built a squad. It's new players, all trying to gel them all together, a completely new centre-back partnership. And we didn't lose more than 3 games on the bounce at any one stage of the season, and that only happened twice. So there was never really a moment where we could lose any real faith in him. There was a tricky start, and we'll get into that in a second. It was a tricky start, and then there was always a moment. There was never a point where it seemed hopeless. It seemed like we were on a downward spiral and we couldn't get out of it. There were a lot of draws, and if you remember, most of those draws were us thinking, how did we draw that? We should have won. And it wasn't, how did we manage to scramble a point out of that game when we've seen none of the ball? It was completely different to see Palace in that position. It was still frustrating, but it was different. So just to read my tweet, and then we'll move quickly on because we are on a tight time schedule here. I put on the 6th of July 2021, really enjoyed the Vieira interview on the official Palace site. I'm hopeful that this is a progressive appointment that fits well. It won't be easy, and we'll need to give him time to build the club the way he wants, but he's saying the right things and has got a lot going for him. So that was my opinion at the time. So I don't think, despite DR's best efforts this season to lie to everybody on Twitter and say I'm Vieira out when he gets bored, I don't think there's anyone who'll find anything negative from me about Vieira around the appointment. Or
I mean, the only person on the back of this WhatsApp that's ever been Vieira out is DR every time we lose, isn't it, really?
Sorry, and I as you said that, I just got distracted. He actually first tried to say it on the 15th of August, where he claimed that I was joining him on a video chat to talk about why Vieira should be sacked after the first game. So, yeah, he was trying for the whole season to do that. Anyway, so look, 3-0 defeat against Chelsea, the first game of the season, was a tough game. We obviously didn't have Gallagher at the point, but it was really tricky start to the season. We drew 0-0 against Brentford. We then lost to Watford.
Can I just say we had a lot of players out as well?
We really, absolutely right. There was context for all of this, and then drew 2-2 with West Ham. So, Caragh, did you kind of fear the worst that start, or was what you were seeing, encouraging enough for you not to have any fear?
Yeah, no, I didn't fear the worst. Mostly because I don't think anyone expected us to have a cracking start, right? Because there were so many unknowns that I don't think the expectation was, we're going to go and absolutely storm it. As Mike said, we also had a fair amount of players out injured at the beginning, so it just kind of felt like, well, my memories of it anyway. Maybe I was a bit more angry at the time, but my memories of it was just a bit more like, okay, what are we watching here? What's the plan? Let's see how Vieira reacts to this and how the players react to it, and go forward from there. So I didn't feel panicked or I don't want to say I didn't feel disappointed. It's obviously you never want to see your team lose, but it didn't feel like the same way that we had been losing the year before. There wasn't like that kind of heaviness and that like depression around the way that we were playing. It just kind of felt like we were what we were, which was a new team finding our feet and, up against, a Brentford side that was newly promoted, but they kind of, that first month or so, took the Premier League by storm in a way. And we were like a really well-gelled team and stuff. And so I think our performances just reflected quite accurately where we were.
That's true. And again, I don't think that's, that's not looking back now and deciding that was the case because of how things turned out. I think that genuinely was how most people felt. It was, frustration perhaps during the games. I think the Brentford game was quite hard to watch because it just wasn't quite coming together for us. And I think the defeat against Watford was a really tough one to take, as well as we'd started to play some nice football. But I think the West Ham game, from my recollection, was one of those where you started to see the kind of the way that we were going to play. Gallagher got both those goals, but I think we were 1-0 and then 2-1 down, and we hit back in both cases. I think the second Gallagher goal was only a couple of minutes after Antonio had scored for West Ham, and celebrated hugely, and it was a really satisfying game, and we kind of finished that game quite strongly. And I think that was a moment where I started to think, okay, we're not doing too bad here. And what followed that, Mike, was a 3-0 victory over Spurs. And again, cast your mind back, that was Edouard's first game. Came off the bench and scored 2 goals. In fact, all 3 goals were scored in the last 14 minutes of the game in that 3-0 victory. But that was a really strong performance, if you remember. And what was, you're thinking back, your kind of reaction at that point?
All I can remember really is after the game, Terence pointing out that Edouard scored a goal something like every 3.6 minutes he was on the pitch, and realising that he was the greatest striker of all time.
That's it, yeah.
That kind of result a few years ago would have stuck in the memory to the nth degree, but those things are happening more and more regularly, and absolutely beautiful result. I know that it was soon squashed with the next result because I know we went up there hoping maybe we'd get a draw, but we lost, won 3-0, then lost 3-0, which I think is we looked at the time as incredibly rare occurrence in the Premier League.
Yeah.
But beautiful day.
No, exactly. You remember that Liverpool game was a really tough one to take as well. It was a goal just before half time. Go on, Caragh.
I was just going to say, not that I hold a grudge, but I do. And that Spurs game was particularly delicious because it was against Nuno after he'd
yes,
my language. So that is my overriding memory of just the joy of the team that he tried to use as a pawn in his game, defeating him overwhelmingly. It was beautiful.
Fantastic point. And one of the things that I had genuinely forgotten, I when you mentioned him earlier, I was like, oh yeah, we were basically going to appoint him, and then I didn't think any more. But you're quite right, he was obviously Spurs manager at that point, but not for a tremendously long time afterwards. Got a real hard time of it. It's such a shame. But anyway, But the Liverpool game, I remember being a tough one to take. I think we'd done really well in the first half. We'd looked actually quite dangerous at times, but had struggled to really create. But we weren't terrible. We weren't giving too much away. And it wasn't, it was just before half time. I think Mane got his standard goal against Palace. And then, we, it was another one of those where you just felt performance actually deserved a bit more than we got. That's where officials started to get talked about and things like that. It was one of those types of games. And, it'd be wrong in this first part as we look back. It'd be wrong not to obviously reference the fact that the game after the Liverpool game was our first game against Brighton, where we didn't play brilliantly, but we played. It was it just wasn't a great game. I had to look back at the stats earlier, and there was only Brighton had 6 shots in total in that game, and we had 5, and it was very, very even, but not particularly great. And we didn't do ourselves justice, but we were winning the game until the 95th minute. when obviously Morpay scored. And celebrated like they'd won the league. It was, again, that was pretty hard to take, and it was at the time. We went and drew against Leicester, then we drew against Arsenal, back-to-back 2-2s, which is another rare occurrence.
Just jump in there. The Arsenal game was an amazing away day just because there was so many back of the nest people there. But the Leicester game, we've got this narrative in our head that we conceded goals late, and obviously we did against Arsenal, and it was tough to take. But the Leicester game, we came back from being behind, and it's important to remember that did happen as well.
No, you're absolutely right, and momentum was a really big thing there. It was really we'd seen it, as I said, the first time we saw it that season was against West Ham, where we just mentally were strong from the off, and that has to come down to the manager. That really does, to instill the belief in the squad that the game isn't dead. And we would have to be really disappointed when I remember vividly how disappointed we were as fans when West Ham scored, and straight away 2 minutes later Gallagher scores again and it's 2-2. That was the first time that the team showed that mental toughness. But you're right, the Leicester game was a fantastic example of that. We were nowhere near them in the first half. Second half, absolutely miles better. And decisive changes, great mentality, decisive changes. That's what was the biggest difference for us probably in the whole season. And, I think just as we sort of draw towards the conclusion of looking back at the first part of the year, I think you have to look at the Man City game and the performance we put there. It was a performance where we conceded a lot of possession, and it's not our normal way of playing. And you think back to the 0-0, I think later in the year, in the season, where we were much more on an even keel, I think, with them in terms of how we played, despite the fact we didn't win the game. But this was one where we let them have the ball, but they could not get through us. Here's just to show what a great performance it was to beat them 2-0. They completed 562 passes to our 231. They had 68% of possession, yet they only had the exact same numbers of shots as us. 3 on target, 4 off target, 7 shots. So we played counter-attacking brilliantly. That day, I remember James McArthur was outstanding. Wilfried Zaha was outstanding. Conor Gallagher was an absolute beast that day, getting into the flanks and crossing the ball in. Tackles everywhere and, just a menace and getting the late goal to really seal the win after the early Zaha goal. So an absolutely fantastic game and probably a high watermark for us in the season. Caragh.
No, definitely. And I think it was a really exciting point where we started to see one thing that I don't think we mentioned yet, which is, as the season went on, being able to actually have some squad rotation, which what is squad rotation when you're Crystal Palace? And we had that, and that enabled that switch in play depending on who our opponents were. And it's such a small thing, but I think when you're used to just having one starting 11 that is your best starting 11 and you just got to hope for the best, then being able to really have a starting 11 put out that is tailored to defeat the opponent, and then they go and do it and they manage the game absolutely brilliantly, was, I think, when we started to, maybe not started, but when we really saw how well Vieira was doing managerially and how much all of the players really knew what they were doing and got to a point where they were so well drilled on knowing exactly what their individual jobs were on the pitch and exactly how that fed into overall performances. So it was I think you're right, I think it was a real kind of mark of the season and of this team.
Yeah, definitely. We've ended the year as a team Man City didn't score against. The champions were unable to beat us, were unable to score against us. We were excellent against them. And again, you look at the manager, you look at the coaching staff and what they did preparing for those games, and that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And not many do that against Man City. So I think that really just shows the level that we were capable of. But we weren't far off on the consistency either. But I know we ended that game and went to Wolves and beat them 2-0 as well. So that was really great. I know briefly, Mike, you might want to touch on the madness of the Burnley 3-3 that followed.
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly gutting, and kind of after those games, 6 points from 2 games, thought, okay, well, Burnley's in the bag. But that is almost a lesson into, not thinking like that. And yeah, so it's proper like pinball game. I know we went 2-1 down, but to go in at 3-2 and then for them to get an equaliser, depressing game. And for Caragh, you driving up there, I mean, not even drinking.
Yeah, although I was protected by the fact that it was my first ever away game, so there was some excitement. And the first half was so wild that we just sat there, myself, Eskif and DR at half time while Chris Clark went and got a drink. And we all just kind of sat in a bit of shocked silence and was like, what? Like, it was a bit... yeah, we just felt a little bit traumatized, I think, with the amount of things that had happened in the first half. It was a disappointing result, but I don't know. It's part of the journey now, isn't it?
Sorry, Hambo, you go.
No, I was just going to say, when you look back at it, we had a high point. We beat Man City. We followed it up with victory against Wolves, which was really comfortable, and they were doing really well at the time. But the Burnley result was a kick in the teeth, and it actually was that spell, that 4 games from Burnley 3-3 all the way through a 2-1 defeat against Villa, a 1-0 defeat against Leeds, and a 1-0 defeat against Man United. That was probably, I would say, one of the low points of the season. We kind of got the highest point and the lowest point in very quick succession, which was, in some ways, it was good to get them out of the way together, really. So it was, but it was interesting to see. That was probably the thing that I remember most about that period, the wobble. And I looked at it after we lost to Man United personally and thought, okay, well, we got a run of games here now that are going to be, pretty important to where we're going to end up this season. But we beat Everton 3-1. You think you turned a corner again, but then 2-2 against Southampton, Spurs beat us 3-0, and you just think, oh my God, okay, when are we gonna, put a decent run of results together? And it kind of just at the end of the year, we'd got to that point where we never had the awful start and the really tough period of settling in that we kind of expected that we would have to have had. But we'd started to dare to dream because of the football we were watching and the performance against Man City in particular. We started to dare to dream. So we got taken a little bit back down to earth, as we passed through Christmas. That Boxing Day defeat against Spurs was a really tough one. And you kind of just thought, okay, maybe the second half of this season is going to be a bit tricky. And I think if we can leave it in a sensible location, quick reference to the fact that after that we beat Norwich 3-0, which again you would have expected, and then lost to West Ham. So again, not really putting anything together. We then will stop at the point where we played our first FA Cup game of the season against Millwall. So memories from that, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, let's first of all, Tottenham away, that was tough because their fans are, as we all know, horrific. So needed a stiff drink after that. But my favourite game that I was there at for the year was Millwall away. To go 1-0 down from the Butland era, for the chance that came over from them, about the HF not saying anything, then for us to win 2-1, some horrific chance, exactly what you'd expect from Millwall, some stuff that took you straight back to a time way before I was born, thankfully. They're still at it, but it was so satisfying. It was, Butland at the end apologising, that the team celebrating in a way that you rarely see from professional footballers. Absolutely amazing. And all it was the third round of the FA Cup. It's not like we'd stayed up in the Premier League or anything. Absolutely, hands down, my favourite game of the season. Great place to end this pod. I'm sure Caragh's got equally great memories.
I do, although the one memory of that day that I don't like is the fact that we missed Mateta's goal. because of how slow the service was at half time. So another thing that I'll never forgive Millwall for. But I do think when we then went forward from that game through the rest of the season, we can look back, and in many ways it felt like there was almost a bit of a coming of age for Michael Olise there. Maybe I'm putting a bit of a fairy tale spin on it, but I think the games he'd played in prior to that, I think we all commented on maybe there being a little bit of shyness in the games that he'd started, and not quite being able to come on, start the game and like attack the football, but the kind of hostility of that game, he just thrived in it, absolutely thrived. And then from that moment onwards, there was never a game where he looked like that kind of shy player again for the rest of the season, I don't think. So I mean, a great kind of battle to have witnessed, but also a really nice part of his journey maybe to look back on as well.
I think that's a really good observation. And again, as Mike said, a really good place to end our first part here, which is, that Olise did visibly grow in that game. The fact that he got direct abuse, and we remember the photo, remember the stuff being chucked at him and all that kind of stuff. And he just stood up, and it's where you really saw what a character he actually is as well. Because, he's one of those, similar to Wilf, can be taken very much the wrong way if you're not careful. In a totally different way. Wilf gets stick for being a passionate and argumentative player, but that's the mentality he goes onto the pitch with to get the best out of himself. Olise at times looks very casual, reserved, shy, all those things, and to the point where he doesn't even really celebrate a goal. And but then you just see in that game what steel there is underneath it, what drive there is, and as you say, that really it stayed with him for the rest of the season and showed what a tremendous footballer he is. So thank you very much to Mike and to Caragh. Thank you for listening to this first part of the show. And we of course have valued all of your correspondence throughout the course of the year. And apologies you haven't got any of that in this show, but it is an end of season review, and maybe Nick will reach out as he hosts the second part for some comments and questions from yourselves. But for our part, we're done. So part 2 will be with you very shortly. But it's goodbye from the three of us, and we hope you have a great summer. Just keep an eye out for special shows and reactions on all of our social media accounts, especially over on YouTube, where you should like and subscribe immediately if you haven't. Cheers, bye!